This is another session. We have less people than normal, but hopefully somebody's got some good stories. Otherwise, I'll have to get Desta to tell us what happened last week at the event in Crestone, Colorado. The rules are always the same as we say to try to respect other people, because a lot of weird stories are going to be told here. And we talked about Shasta last time. We won't talk about Shasta that much, although I just got some word from somebody's at Shasta this weekend for another event, and nothing has happened yet, but we won't talk about that. So some people may want to have some stories to share. I would suggest that you take maybe 5 minutes to tell your story, whatever, and then if people have questions, then we can come back to you again. We can sort of cycle around so we don't have one person telling the whole thing. And if there's really no stories, I'll tell a few stories about some stuff. I'm having an interview on Monday with Joe Wood, who was married to Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones. And we're going to talk about UFOs and music, which I don't think she knows the extent of where this goes. So I can tell a little bit of those stories, or we can get Desta to tell a story. But I'm just going to open it up, so anybody who wants to talk, we would suggest that you keep yourself muted unless you want to talk, because what happens is you don't realize it, but if your mic is open and there's noise in your room, you suddenly come on the camera, and you may not want to be on the camera. So stay muted as long as, because that's the way this thing works. It basically picks up who's talking and opens their camera up. So stay muted, and the first person who wants to start will go ahead and whatever.
Okay, Grant. Yeah. Hey, Grant. Greg Silva here.
Yeah, Greg.
From our last get together with the Shasta people, Ray shared that she had a 33-page summary of her experiences.
Yes.
On the mountain. And somebody, I think they put a link out in the chat, and I missed the link, and I was wondering if I could get a hold of that link, or if you had that kind of summary available.
Okay, while people are talking, I will put the link in the chat, or Desta will find it. Either one of us will put the link in the chat. That was the report from last year, the Shasta event. Desta's helping me. We're going to put up, for anybody that wants, can email me at whitehouseuFO@gmail.com. We have a report from this year, and it's, I believe, Desta can correct me, I think it's 120 pages long from the events on that weekend. And we go through, as you'll see on my White House UFO YouTube channel, we've interviewed quite a few of the witnesses that were involved, and there was quite a bit of stuff that happened there. So we interviewed them, and we put it in. I'm also going to do a PowerPoint presentation. But the one from last year basically has to do with this event called The Door. It's a door structure. It looks exactly like a door in the side of the mountain. And they picked this up, for people who don't really know what we're talking about here. They picked this up through their antennas. Like, people are getting messages, and there was people there. There was people in England who were getting these messages about this door. So they didn't know this thing existed, and they went looking for it last year, and they found this thing, and it's at what's called the McLeod Falls. There's the upper, middle, and lower falls just on Mount Shasta. And this is on the middle falls, and they actually found this. And so what they do is they take the group and they go and they meditate against this door. And I think Mark is here. Mark had a very dramatic experience, although he doesn't really talk about it, but he had an experience. A bunch of people had experiences where they went inside. They had these visions that they were inside the mountain. They were getting messages at this door thing. So that was basically what last year's report was about. I do a little bit on the door this year, because we went there twice to the door to start with, and I tell you the messages that people got at the door. But then I go into what happened on the Saturday night and the Sunday morning, and all these events on the top of the mountain where they had this encounter with this non-human intelligence at the top of the mountain. So it was kind of a dramatic story, but I will put the link from last year's report. And then for people that want, I will provide you the full report of this year's, which is finished. It's just, we're just putting the photographs into the report, which is much longer than last year's report. It's quite a bit.
That would be great. I'd like to see it all,
yeah.
Grant, so thank you.
Okay, we will do that. So anybody who wants to start with a story, or there was a couple of people who wanted to talk, I think, last time at the event, and because we were doing Shasta, people didn't get to talk. So somebody take the floor and let's get going.
May I take the floor, Mr. Grant? My
Absolutely.
name,
Go
sure,
ahead.
awesome. Thank you everyone for having me. My name is Amar. I'm a Syrian citizen, but I live in Florida right now. It all started to happen to me when I tried the CE5. I watched the, what's his name, Mr. Greer's documentary and everything, and I said, I'm 31 years old. I've never had any experience, so let me try it. And for a week, I kept trying it almost every night with no results whatsoever. After a few weeks, every time I would go to bed, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel intense vibrations, and I didn't know what were they when they happened to me. And then I decided to, okay, whatever, it's happening to me. I'm just not gonna move, not do anything, and see what happens. And the first time I tried it, it happened to me, and I just kept my eyes closed, and I didn't do anything really. I went through a wormhole. Like, it's exactly like in the movies. You see the colors, and I stuck with it, and the vibrations went away. But midway through, they come back really fast, and you really feel like you're traveling through it. And after that, I ended up in my room. It was exactly where I was, a little bit darker, but I could see everything. And I've done this a couple of times after that, but I did some tests where I would like open my left eye, for example, and I would be able to see my actual room, and I would be able to also see the other version of my room that I was looking at. After I experienced that, I pretty much am till this day able to do it whenever I please. It just takes a specific relaxation procedure when you wake up, and I can do it almost anytime I please. I thought I was going insane, or I was sick, or something like that. So I did tell my family, of course, and I also told a friend to try it. It worked for my mom. She went through the wormhole. It worked for my friend. He went through the wormhole, and eventually he saw his room. I heard Mr. Greg last time when we were talking about Shasta. He was talking about the same wormhole experience, so I don't know if he experienced the same thing. But after that, after like a week of doing this almost every day, I've started actually encountering extraterrestrials. I think they're interdimensional beings is what I encountered. One time I was going to bed, and every time I would close my eyes without trying to even do anything, I would see the star coming down in the darkness of my eyes. You could just see it. And I would freak out and get up. And it happened like 3 times. Then at the end, I was like, I'm just going to sleep. I'm really tired. And as soon as I went to bed, I woke up in space with this really tall human female right next to me. I mean, I was touching her, and I felt what she felt like next to me. I could see her legs; they were human. However, she was extremely tall, and you know, I didn't expect it, so it took me a while to grasp what's going on. But she was already talking to me when I was there. Telepathically, I could hear I could feel the vibrations every time she spoke, and she was basically, I don't know why till this day, she was just like, you see that nebula, and I look at it, and she was like, that's where the dead scientists go, like after their life here on Earth. And I till this day, I don't know why she would tell me something like that. But so I tried to look at her face, but she was so tall and I couldn't see her head. And that's when, snap, I was immediately back in my room. Just so everybody knows, when this was happening, I could still feel my bed and everything. Every time I go through the wormhole, I can feel my room. I can feel my bed. If you were here with me, I still know you're here and I can hear you. So it's like you're still awake, you don't go to bed, but you're also experiencing this other reality. A couple of times, or 3 times actually, I've had, I wasn't again trying to do it or anything, but it was in the same duration where I was trying those experiments. I would wake up and light beings would be in my room. I would see them floating, traveling really fast around the room. But I had direct communication with, they actually spoke to me the same telepathic way. I would say hi, they would immediately say, like I would think hi, and they would immediately reply to me, immediately, as if they already know what was going on in my head. I asked a bunch of them, okay, levitate me. They don't. They did it where my perception, like if I'm looking at the roof, my perception would be higher. They would do it where I would see myself higher, but I would still feel like I'm in the bed, and I'm awake, by the way. That happened to me like twice. One time at night, I just woke up in the evening because my sleeping schedule was messed up that day. And I'm awake and I close my eyes, and I could see an object. It looked like a satellite in my room. Only when I closed my eyes I could see it. And I'm like, okay, well, what is this? And I kept moving my head just to see if I'm imagining it or if it's really there. And it didn't move. It was separate from my perception. It had nothing to do with my eyes myself. And then I just kept staring at it, and then it beamed something into me. I couldn't see the beam, but I felt that it did something to the left side of my head, and I freaked out and I got up and I told my mom immediately.
Well, that's quite a sharing. Can I interrupt it a little bit, Amar?
Absolutely. I want you to interrupt because you spoke about it last time.
Okay. Yeah, it's. Are you familiar with the great Swiss psychologist Carl Jung?
No.
His last name is spelled Jung.
No, but I'll write it down, actually.
Yeah, if you read some of his books, like Man in Search of His Soul, or his book Memories, Dreams, Reflections, it'll give you a connection to what you're beginning to experience. And what he said, by the way, is that which you have summoned cannot be recalled. In other words, these the CE5 protocols you've been practicing has opened a doorway into the other world, what Jung would call the unconscious. And you begin to see parts of your soul that are beckoning and waiting to be acknowledged and integrated within you, would be the way he would understand it, and the way I would understand it as well. So you're on a hell of a journey. And welcome to America.
Thank you very much. If I may share a few more things also that happened to me.
So if you want to continue your sharing, I'll be quiet now.
No, you can interrupt me whenever. Just because you spoke about the wormholes, I take it that you can also do this. Like you've also taught yourself how to do it.
Yes. I studied shamanism with a master shaman just before 9/11, actually, on that weekend. Mm-hmm. And that was in Sacramento, California. That opened me up to begin to journey in tunnels, where I'd find myself flying at enormous speeds. And the idea is that you're entering into the timeless realm, because if you fly at the speed of light, which is what it would look like in Star Trek, you know, when they do the warp drive jump, you know. Well, when you hit the speed of light, time stands still. So now you're in the eternal realm, and that's where the ancestors go. So your nebula thing there is when mentioned where the scientists go, where that would be a kind of a way of symbolizing the realm of eternity. So that, yeah, so I journeyed like that for a couple of years, just endless tunnel journeys, and then once I became aware of what it might mean consciously, like I just shared, and since I have a PhD in theoretical physics, I was able to begin to make conscious connections between physics and psychology. And then I realized that it's a metaphor for psychically journeying into the other realm, the Unus Mundus, where the ancestors are. And Jung called that realm the Unus Mundus, UNUS MUNDUS, which means the one world, the united world, where all the opposites are united. And that's the realm where you will get information on how to unite the opposites within yourself. In other words, be able to unite various parts of your soul in your own self. So that, yeah, I've journeyed quite a bit. So back to you.
Yeah, sure. I've done this. Also, sometimes when I try it, I just see darkness and nothing, but I can play any music I want in my head, high quality. I know Grant talks about this. I've experienced it before I actually even found his videos about this or anything. I can listen to music that I haven't heard for years, and it would just be like I'm listening to it right now.
Fascinating. Tell me a little bit more about that, because that's kind of an interesting connection to.
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of times I was trying to do the traveling through the wormhole. What I do is I literally lay in bed. When I just wake up, I can't do this before bed or any other time. When I just wake up, I lay in bed and I close my eyes and I count my breath without any other action. And in 10 to 15 minutes, I get those vibrations and I just keep my eyes closed, and then the wormhole appears and I end up sometimes wherever I want, and sometimes it's totally random. Sometimes when I didn't do any intentions, I wasn't even thinking about music, to be honest. I've just, like, you see darkness after the wormhole, and then all you hear is music, but you're awake. So like, I'm like, okay, I want to hear this song. Like in my head, I say, I want to hear this song. And sure enough, it starts playing. I've had a couple of experiences like that, but I haven't been able to purposely do it.
For people that might want to try this, if you were like you instructed your mother how to do this, so what would you say to people? Step 1, step 2, step 3, if you want to.
Okay, yeah. One of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because this is replicatable. You can teach others how to do it, and it actually works. All you have to do is when you wake up, not to get out of bed. I lay on my back, but I've done it also on my in other positions. And you close your eyes, and one inhale, one exhale equals to one breath. You're counting in your head. You're not counting out loud. And sure enough, what I think is happening, someone here might know more than I do, is that your brain thinks that you're going to, like, you're back asleep, but you're not consciously. And as soon as that happens, the vibrations happen. So I would say lay on your back, close your eyes, and count your breath. If you mess up, you can reset. It's just a distraction, so you don't think about anything else around you. And when you get those vibrations, don't move or open your eyes at all. Just ignore them, and you will experience this for sure.
An interesting point. I know some other people teach what seems to be the same technique. You have the phenomena where they talk about your body tries to trick you to find out whether you're asleep or awake. So you'll have an itch, or it'll tell you roll over. And if you roll over, you go to sleep. If you don't roll over and you fight that, then your body goes to sleep and you stay awake, correct?
Yeah, sometimes you will get itches, like your nose would start itching or any other part of your body. And as soon as you do it, everything is back to normal. Like you don't get
Ah,
anything.
oui, tu vois là, ok.
Sacrement.
Ah, j'avais même pas remarqué.
The Canadian food. Oh, what happened?
Vous avez
Okay,
pas parlé.
Ben oui.
Sorry, I'm
correct.
hearing someone else.
C'est
Someone's
Michael.
got their, Philip, your mic is open. Is that you?
It's okay. I've had an experience where I woke up and I looked at the roof in my room, and there was on my on the fan on the roof, there was what seemed to me like tree roots. They were big and brown, and they were there, like they were there. I saw them, and I didn't freak out. I just wanted to see if I was really seeing this. And I stood on my bed immediately, like I was asleep, and I immediately, like when I saw it, I immediately stood on my bed and said, "Hey, how are you?" just to test what was gonna happen. And as soon as I said that, immediately it started taking off to the left, like it started moving to the left, and it disappeared slowly. I don't know if Mr. Greg, you've ever encountered anything like this after your journeys.
Yeah. Well, there's so much in your stuff that could be said, but just with this last incident about the tree roots, you said?
Yep, it looked like a big spider or tree roots, dark brown, and they were on the like they were sitting on the fan as if they were resting on it.
Yeah. Let me refer to some physics as be the simplest explanation. As you may know, light can exhibit a duality in terms of what it says it is. So if you do, like physicists have done, a single slit experiment and shine light into a single slit, and put a screen behind it, the photons of light will randomly start appearing in a pattern around on the screen. And there's a probability of where that particle, that photon of light may hit. And otherwise, if you do a double slit, a two slit, and you put up a screen, you will see alternating black and white lines. And that means the light is behaving as a wave. It's a realm of potential being. The particle part means you've collapsed the wave function into a discrete entity, a photon of light. And so psychologically, a photon of light as a particle would be your logos ego. In other words, your left brain or your brain function. And so that's why when you ask a question or you interrupt the session that you're having with the other side, if you get into your logos, it can't take that. It's not its realm. It's wave-like. It wants you to stay in like an Eros ego state of consciousness that has dimmed the brain and doesn't ask questions, it doesn't think about things, and is just open to it. But once you introduce thinking or motion, the wave-like nature can't coexist with that, and it has to depart. That's my understanding.
That's cool. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah.
I would end with one more test that I did when I started to see my room. This time I was sleeping with my hand and arm under the pillow. And as soon as I got into that state and I could see my room, the first thing I did was I moved my arm up above me. And I opened my eyes immediately just to see if I am actually moving my arm or not. And I don't know if you tried that, I actually, while awake, I have felt the energy of my arm go back to where my actual arm is. I felt it. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's you're having a vision of your subtle body, and that takes it back to your request to see if you could be levitated, and you had the perception that you had moved closer to the ceiling, and yet you had the sensation on your back or wherever I guess you were laying on your back, that
Yeah.
you were still in bed. And so I think what that vision was telling you is that, yes, you can levitate your subtle body, but not your physical body. Yes, you can journey through a wormhole, but the journey involves only your subtle body, in other words, your soul. The Eastern mysticism refers to it as the diamond body. So, and psychically, you can therefore journey through a wormhole, because to open a wormhole physically of any size, say bigger than, say, the size of a golf ball, would require all the energy of a galaxy just to open that. But psychically, it requires very little energy to be able to open a wormhole and travel into other worlds, because psychically, your soul requires no space, basically. Your consciousness requires no space. So that permits you to be able to do these extraordinary things. And the psyche, the unconscious, likes to present these things using metaphors. So from physics, Einstein's Rosen bridge, from physics, it draws on those things that we know about now, and helps us to try to connect to these things, but expects us to translate it from being a literal experience of physically doing this to realize it's the activity of your psyche interacting with the psyche at large, the collective unconscious, as Jung put it, to help you begin to learn from the wisdom that the other side is offering to you now, to how to integrate your own soul. So it's a wonderful journey. I've been on it for 40 years, so I highly recommend it. But it takes 40 years or a lifetime to really flesh it all out.
yeah. Part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, Mr. Grant, is because I really want you to try this. If it's I don't have an audience. I don't plan on having an audience or anything like that. But I think if someone like you actually did this and experienced it and told everyone how to do it, it could change a lot of people's perspective on what reality is. And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
that's
Yeah, go
possible?
ahead.
Yeah. So one of my questions was, when did this start happening to you?
Right now I'm 31. It happened when I was 30 last year, sometime. Last year I would go to bed and wake up normally. I would be awake, but sitting in my bed, and without doing anything, I would get these intense vibrations. I thought I was sick because it was happening every night almost.
Okay, I do have a few more questions. So when this started, did you also start to feel depressed? Were you feeling a type of psychosis coming on?
What is psychosis? Sorry.
You said you felt like you were going crazy. I was just wondering if you had felt any kind of severe depression at the same time.
No, I don't believe I was depressed. I was normal. Especially when you wake up, you're not really thinking about anything. You're just sitting there. But no, I didn't have any depression or anything of that sort.
Okay, well, when these experiences ended, let's say, when did they end? In the spring?
That's a good question, actually. They never ended. When they started happening to me every night, even sometimes without me trying to do it. I would get interactions with light beings and whatnot. I started missing work. Like I have morning shifts sometimes, and I started missing work, and I would like have these experiences 2 hours before work was supposed to start, and when they're done, it's already like an hour after work. So I made an intention not to have them anymore at some point, just so I can. Plus, when they were happening, after they were happening, you wake up and you still feel tired. Like you don't feel like you slept. But right now, I can tell you, if I put my mind into it and I do it, and I have after that, it will happen again.
Yeah, and just so I have a couple of interpretations, and I totally agree with the previous gentleman about Carl Jung. But I was also reading a very good book this weekend called The Magician Within: Accessing the Shaman in the Male Psyche. That's by Robert Moore. He was a Jungian psychoanalyst. And I believe that this is kind of the experience that shaman went through, and I kind of interpret your roots from the ceiling as an interpretation of, okay, you're in the underworld now,
Yeah.
You're going to experience the pain of the underworld. And in the end of that, what you should experience is this, what in Buddhism is called the blowing out of the personality, or nirvana, in which you enter a phase of bliss. And in this bliss, you can actually sense the oneness of the entire universe. I don't know. Did you experience anything like that?
I've experienced, especially that I'm Syrian, and for the past since 2011, I would watch the news and all the horrible stuff that were happening. I got to a point after experiencing this where I stopped watching news. When someone on TV is trying to brainwash someone into a certain way of thinking, I would instantly catch it, and I know what their intention is. If you guys are interested, one other thing that was major that happened to me actually led me to call Jimmy on Fade to Black, and he answered immediately, but that was like a synchronicity. If you were interested, I could talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure, tell that.
Okay, so again, one time I woke up and I was just laying in bed and I closed my eyes, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see like a tablet with something that looked like hieroglyphs, like Egyptian writing on it, 10 lines or more. And they weren't stationary. They would they would be facing one way, blink the other way, and so it's the same letter or whatever it is, but it would blink to the other side. And I saw it for a good 2 minutes. I kid you not. When I closed in my right eye only, I would close it and I would see it there, and then it disappeared. And then I listened to Jimmy Church, his radio show on YouTube. And a day or two after that, they were talking with a rabbi about the Moses tablets, and they were describing them exactly as I saw. So I'm like, okay, this is a sign that I have to call and tell them that I've been experiencing these things, and let me tell you how to do it. And sure enough, when I called, I was the first caller, and he answered immediately. So that was weird that happened. And I've never called a radio show like that or anything before in my life.
What color were these tablets, if you don't mind me asking?
The background was black. It was surrounded by really dark blue, but the letters themselves were like golden.
The black gold. Yeah. Well, that's real interesting. I wanted to mention something about the music. I know Grant has a big interest in music, and you are having that experience as well. Mm-hmm. Jung talks about Pauli's world clock vision, and it produced the most sublime harmony in him. Wolfgang Pauli was a theoretical physicist. He won the Nobel Prize for it in the 50s. And he collaborated with Jung for like a quarter of a century. But anyway, there's such a thing called the harmony of the spheres. They call it the music of the Spheres. You could Google that, music of the Spheres. And I think what is being communicated to you is that your contact with the unconscious or the other side, or however you want to think about it, has that potential to produce an inner harmony within you, within your soul. It's very interesting that you shut off the nightly news. Is that what I heard you say?
What's that?
Because of the negativity of the nightly news, you avoid it, or is it, what did you say there?
Yeah, I used to listen to the news every time, and now
Yeah.
I feel like I don't have to.
Yeah, well, it's pure poison. It's just all a bunch of lost souls out there babbling away. So, yeah, that's good advice, or good tactic you use there. But anyway, the music of the Spheres.
Yeah, a couple of points I can make. You mentioned me doing it. I'm sort of the dummy in this whole thing. Basically, what I do is I listen to people like you, and Desta is here. Desta has a procedure basically the same as what you're using. It's a little bit different. She can get into it in terms of brain frequencies and stuff like that. She's actually written 2 books that are on my website, Beyond Presidential UFO, that come from this process. She learned to do this process. And we have a book coming out. It's going to be called Contact Modalities, where I basically look at you have one method of getting sort of into the field or whatever it is. And in the book, I list over 70 different methods of getting into the field. And it's basically all the same thing. It's being able to shut down your left brain, disassociate, and pop into the field. Now, you can do it with psychedelics. You can do it with shamanistic practices. Desta has a practice. Mark, I think, who is on here, uses a float tank, and he has some very, very dramatic experiences that happened in the float tank. And again, there you're doing the same thing. You're putting the left brain to sleep. You're cutting out all the noise in the signal, and you're picking up the signal. So I basically watch a bunch of you. In terms of the music, I just put a link in the chat, which is pretty interesting. You mentioned this thing where you can hear exact songs. There's I put a link to a guy. They put him in an MRI at Penn State University and tested this guy. And this is a guy who can listen to 4 symphonies at the same time in his head. And they actually tested him. They took a conductor from a symphony orchestra as the control, and they gave them 4 different pieces of music, completely different types of music, all classical music, but different types of musical types. And he would listen to these 4 pieces of music, and then they would put him in the MRI machine, and they'd say, okay, start piece number 1. And then he'd listen to this piece of music in his head, and okay, start piece number 2. Okay, start piece number 3, and then wait 30 seconds. Okay, start piece number 4. And then they would let him listen to these music for 3 or 4 minutes, and they'd say, okay, stop. Where are you in piece number 1? And he would say exactly, he would sing them exactly where they are in the piece. 2, 3, 4, absolutely dead on to the note for each one, exactly where they were in the symphony. And of course, the conductor, he could do the first symphony. He could remember the first symphony and time it, but after that, he was completely lost. He had no idea what was going on. And this guy says he can actually, and I guess if you practice this, and the link is in there, you'll hear the interview with this guy and who he is. He says he can actually go she asked him, well, how do you watch 4 symphonies at the same time? And he said, well, what I do is I have one on the stage, one's on the other side of the stage, one is in front of the stage, one is down in a hole below the stage, and he can actually go into each of the symphonies, and he can actually pick up, say, the guy that's playing the violin, and he can actually go up to the guy playing the violin and listen to him play one piece in that thing, and then go back out and listen to the whole symphony. And it shows the idea that memory is perfect, that it is there. It's the ability to access memory that is imperfect, that we have all this noise in the signal and we can't access. So everybody has that ability to remember everything. In fact, if you look at experiencers who, from the free survey, the Edgar Mitchell free survey, 40% of people who have had experiences say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And you can see this with memory people. I did a video that I think Desta has posted on my White House UFO YouTube channel. When I was in London, the thing I wanted to see in London, I wanted to see Stephen Wiltshire's museum or art gallery there. This is a guy who's an autistic. And you find this with autistic kids, they have left brain damage. So all the noise is shut off, all the stuff that sort of throws you off in terms of things that are bothering you, or, you know, the rational, analytical, the little voice in your head, all that's sort of shut off. And this is the guy that they can actually take, and they've tested this guy, and they take him over London and for 45 minutes in a helicopter, or New York City. I've actually got a print of his New York City thing. So they take him over New York City for 45 minutes, they fly him around in a helicopter, and then they land him and they give him a piece of paper that's 8 feet high by 16 feet long, and he basically draws a New York City skyline. He has the right number of floors, the right number of windows, exactly, each building exactly where it's supposed to be, and all he sees is for 45 minutes. And yet this guy he can't really take care of himself. He didn't learn to speak until he was 9 years old. So it's interesting where you are referring to this phenomena where you can actually remember the exact piece. There's another one, and I'll shut up. There's a piece, and the guy's name is Stuart. His name is escaping me now. It's called the Angeli Symphony. If you look up on Google, on YouTube, and put Angeli with a L-I, Angeli Symphony. This is a guy who had a bar in England, and he tells a story that his firstborn son, whose name was Ben, dies, and the night that he buries him, after he buries his son, he has a dream, and in the dream he calls these sort of snow people that met him first when he came into his room when he was like 5 years old, came to him and said, sometimes when this happens, we give the person a gift. And he had no musical background like me. He had no interest in music. And he was given the Angeli Symphony, this entire symphony in his head. And he woke up. He could remember every little note of the symphony. And he told his wife, he said, I have to recreate the symphony. I'm going to London in 6 months, and I'm going to do this symphony. She said, you have no musical background. They all thought he was kidding. He actually left his family. He was divorced. She divorced him over this. He went to London. He said he had no choice. He had to do this symphony. It took him 20 years. He had to raise over £1 million, and he recreates this symphony by learning to play a guitar, by getting a jazz guy who helps him compose this thing, to score this thing. He raises the money. It takes him 20 years, and it's actually played one time by the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and they say it was the only time the London Philharmonic Orchestra ever stood up and applauded a composer. So you have that, and you can look that up. Stuart Sharp is the guy's name, and it's called the Angeli Symphony, and his story is absolutely riveting about this idea that the music appears in your head, you remember every single note, and it shows the power of memory, and that we live in a world where we have so much noise and so much signal that we don't realize how magnificent and how complex the world actually is.
But actually, you know, Grant, that's an excellent example of compensation, psychic compensation. This man had an enormous loss of his son that cost him his marriage, his relationship, but yet being gifted with that musical score, you call it the harmony of the spheres connection, saved probably his sanity. It gave him something to do for 20 years where he could slowly integrate the loss of his son and the turmoil that followed. So it connects back to Amar's experience of music. It's a call to great harmony in your soul kind of thing. But Grant, I'm curious, a book is being published. Is this in your name? And it has 72 protocols for being able to journey or make contact.
Yeah.
And none of them work for you.
No, I've not been able to do it. I've had these download experiences that I've talked about a few times, where suddenly something comes in my head, and it comes with absolute certainty. So it's sort of like, you know, the aha moment where you're watching something and suddenly it occurs to you, oh, I know how this works, or whatever, something like that. And then something else comes in, something else. And I had the one download experience, which was 24 items, one after another, these ideas about false assumptions in the world. You believe it's made out of nuts and bolts. It's actually made out of consciousness. You believe it's one life. It's actually multiple lives. You believe that it's random. It's actually pattern. And these sort of things were coming into my head one after another. So I've had those experiences. But in terms of, I've tried the meditation. I've tried I've even tried the lucid dreaming. I used all the drugs that they advised. I followed the protocols and stuff like that. I've never been able to do it. So I've just sort of assumed that's not my my thing. That's why I linked up with Desta, because, and I don't know if Desta wants to get in on this thing, but Desta told me at one point that she had this download experience where she remembered how the world was actually created, and she was describing this, and I'm going, really? Why? And I realized instead of me tapping in, I tap into people like you guys online here who interact with the phenomena or the other reality, and I basically listen to other people. I see myself more as a person who's there to sort of document the stories that other people are telling.
Well, that's very interesting. We all have different fates. My God.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was wondering, Amar, do you have dreams accompanying you during this time of all these visions and tunnel journeys and so on?
So when I do it successfully, I just experience it. But sometimes I try to do it and I fall into a very vivid dream. But after I did it a bunch of times, I didn't dream at all when I went to bed.
But in general, do you have dreams on a regular basis?
Yes, actually, I have very vivid dreams. One of them, I went to flight school and I took a big break between my lessons one time, and I went to bed thinking about it because I was going back to school the next day. And my dream, that amazing dream I still remember, was literally a flight lesson. It kept going over, reset. Like it was me in the plane flying it over and over and over, going over my mistakes. So the next day when I went to flight school, my instructor was like, wow, it's like you didn't take a 6-month break. Because when you're a pilot, you forget things and you lose your reaction. But that was one dream. But yeah, I dream a lot and I remember most of my dreams. Yep.
Are you recording all this? Documenting all this?
I haven't documented anything.
Oh, you have to document this because it's important stuff. I mean, it's to share to the world in terms of people like me or other people who are trying to figure it out. I sort of see that you're in the groove. Like when I have my download experiences, I know it comes with absolute certainty. Like there's no way this is not true. It's like, this is true. And when you pick that up, then you realize that there is like these people who say 40% of all people who've had the experience, like a UFO experience, say they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And it's that same sort of thing. It's sort of like they're tapped in. And then people will say, well, it's just anecdotal. These people just believe they're having these experiences. And I say, well, if you get people, and I've talked to these people who remembered everything, I said, if somebody says they knew the answer to everything in the universe, don't you think you should at least talk to this person and maybe try to figure out something or ask questions or whatever? Maybe, if it's true, I mean, it seems to imply that all the answers are out there and it's the ability of us to access. So that's why I'm very happy to listen to people like you who have gotten into that field. And that's where I think, it's important to record it so that you can compare your stuff with other people who have been in there, or Desta or Mark or some of these other people. I think most of the people on here, maybe someone else can jump in. I think most of the people on this conversation have had that kind of experience where they've been in that world and they've gotten some material that they didn't, like they say as well, 42% of all experiencers say they have mathematical, scientific, or technical material in their head that they did not learn in school. So maybe someone else might want to back up Amar here and with this idea that other people are having these experiences as well.
Grant, can I ask you a question, Grant?
Sure.
So I was wondering, have you ever heard of an author named Mabel Collins?
No.
So she wrote a book or 2 books that I would recommend for you if you wanted to see where you are on this path. She wrote them using what she called waking clairvoyance.
Okay.
So she wanted to know, how can you do this, basically? And so she wrote these books with these steps in them of what you have to do. And I found they were some of the first books I came across, and I found that they described me to a T. In fact, I was reading them and it brought tears to my eyes because I was like, this is me. She wrote this book about me is what I felt like. Yeah. But she wrote it back in 1895 or something.
Wow.
It's called Light on the Path. And then she wrote a book that explains Light on the Path called Our Glorious Future.
Wow. Okay.
And And I don't know. I would suggest maybe you look at that since you haven't had some of these, you know, crazier types of experiences. Maybe maybe you're missing one of those steps, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I
Well,
can share.
but actually, Grant, do you have dreams?
Yeah.
I have dreams. I used to record dreams. That's one thing I did learn to do is I never could
Okay.
remember my dreams. And then I was trying to learn the lucid dream process from Stanford that Stephen LaBerge was teaching. And I was taking the drugs that they take for people with Alzheimer's and stuff. They use this to increase your lucidity and stuff. And I was able to remember my dreams. And what I would do is I would drink a lot of water before I went to bed, and I would go to the bathroom about 5 times during the night. And so every time I'd get up, I'd remember another dream. I got to the point where I had I could remember 7 dreams a night.
Wow.
But they were so stupid. I just thought this is absolutely stupid. And it was the old thing that you actually had to sort of turn on the light, because and people have had this experience when you try to write it down sort of in the dark or whatever, and then you get up the next morning, you read it, and you go like, "What the heck is that?" You can't. It's like some other language or whatever. And so I would do that, and I actually had one point where I did have a lucid dream, where I realized I was dreaming. And I remember I was south of the city. I remember this happened one time, and I knew the protocols. I knew all the protocols. It's like when this happens, don't get excited because you'll pop back into you'll wake up. And so this guy threw this grain up into the air, and it sort of swirled around. I went, "That's pretty weird. I mean, that doesn't happen." And then I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm dreaming." And then I said, "Oh, I've worked all this time and learned all that to remember my dreams and stuff." And I said, "Oh, I've got to stay lucid. I've got to stay in the dream." And one of the protocols they use is you spin like a figure skater. You twirl like a figure skater, and it will stabilize you. Or you look at your hands, and it will stabilize you so you don't wake up. And so I spun, but I forgot the next protocol was when you spin, you end up in a different place. You don't stay in the same place. You wake up in a different sort of scene or whatever. And I woke up in my office at the University of Manitoba, and I went, "Oh shoot, I woke up. I blew it. I didn't do it right or whatever." And of course I wasn't in my office at the University of Manitoba. I had woken up in my office at the University of Manitoba. I was still sleeping, but I got fooled. I forgot the fact that you end up in a different place. And that was the only time I was able to do it. So I was able to remember a lot of dreams. And after a while, I just thought, these dreams are so stupid. They don't make any sense. And I stopped recording them. So I'm not now back to, I can remember maybe one dream as I'm waking up, but I've stopped doing that.
Yeah, well, Scott, if you're interested, send me some of your dreams, because your dreams will probably tell you why you're not able to access the other side like you would like to.
Yeah.
So I give you that as an open invitation, no
Okay.
charge.
Okay.
I would like to
Okay.
step in if I could.
Sure.
I've been in contact these since, this is Alfred. I've been in contact these since I was about 8 years old. I started a group 2013, a contact group, and a lot led up to that, me doing that. But and we had, picked up the radar detectors, the EMFs, done all the proper procedures to follow these protocols to make contact. And it's interesting that at the end of the day, we realize it's all about consciousness, as Grant has reiterated in his speeches and his talks. But it's a singularity of consciousness. But what happened to me was, and this is all documented, is that in 2015, May of 2015, me and 2 other colleagues were out in this land, and we had our EMF meter on, we had the radar detector going, and we had a camera set up, 2 cameras set up facing this hill. And the camera was about 20 feet from the hill before the hill started the incline, and we were about 5 feet behind the camera, and the 2 cameras. And there were 3 of us, and we were talking, and we had these tones going, and we had just done a mantra and meditation, and then all of a sudden we hear these sounds. And I was on Zoom last year, Grant, and I sent you a chat, and we never really discussed anything after that, but there were these sounds that sounded like wild monkeys, and right before that, I saw a flash in the sky, and you would hear that in in the video, you hear me say, wow, did you guys see that? It was like a large flash bulb above us. And so we heard these sounds came in, and after that, the ship came in, but we didn't see it with our physical eye. What happened was, it was just like, a good analogy would be the old AM, FM radios where you're dialing and you're shifting in between frequencies. The ship was phasing in and out of this frequency, and the camera was picking it up because the camera sees more frames a second than the human eye does. And none of the EMF meters were going off, nothing. So as a ship is hovering there, and you can see, have any of you heard of George Adamak from the 1950s?
Yeah.
George
Yeah.
Adamak?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. If you look at some of his photographs of the ships, underneath the ships, there are these spheres, like 3 or 4 spheres, and those are part of the energy systems that help propulsion the ships. So this ship had those under there, and the ship is hovering, and we had no clue we're talking. And this is about 9 o'clock at night when this actually started recording. And you could see this viewing window and these beings looking at us. And then all of a sudden, the windows are upside down, the triangles in the ship. And you can see the ship, and it's just phasing in and out of dimensions. And we had no clue. And then all of a sudden, through the video, you can see 3 beings coming out because their shadows are blocking part of the ship. They're silhouettes. And what we found out later, because one of the gentlemen in the group studied in Mexico City, he's Mexican, Hispanic, he was born in Mexico City, and he was taught by shamans how to remote view and do conscious remote viewing. Okay, so we had that experience. We thought we left at 10 o'clock that night. We all decided we were tired at 10, got in the car, we looked at the clock, and it was 11:30, okay? So we don't know what happened in that time. We had no idea that ship even came down. So what happened was, a week after that, my friend came over, the one that was with me, Victor. We're in my basement doing Vedic meditation in Sanskrit. Came outside to my side of my house, and the ship flew over my house 3 times. As it was leaving the 3rd time, it projected this almost an orange, fiery, coherent, funnel-shaped energy into my house. It was about 20 foot long, 3 foot diameter at the wide end, and it came to a point, and it was like a funnel shape, and shot towards my hallway in my bedroom. Well, the next morning, and we just stood there and went, wow, it didn't affect us in any way physically or mentally. We just saw this visually. The next morning, my daughter had a friend over, and they were going by the guest apartment connected to the main house. And they came running upstairs, and they said, Dad. And I said, yeah. And they said, you're not going to believe this, but we just saw this large gray guy standing up in the guest apartment looking at us. And then he put his left hand on his chest, and he ran into the wall, and he was gone. And I said, well, how tall was he? They said, well, about 7 to 8 foot tall, because our refrigerator's 7 foot tall. And they kind of looked at the refrigerator, and they said it's about that tall. So I said, okay, that's interesting. Well, I knew what it was. What it was is the energy. They're projecting their energy, and held within an energy field is the ETs and their energy, because I've had all this fantastic phenomena in my home ever since, speaking, orbs, faces, beings coming in orbs. All this is documented. So in March of this year, this is 5 years later, I had a contact again, and I've had contact ever since, but and prior to that event. But I had contact in March of this year at 9:30 at night. I went to bed, and the being that was on one of the ships that took us in 2015 came to me and said, remember the progression of synchronicity, and showed me the ship and showed us 3 on there, me, Victor, and his sister Lulu. And the next day I sent Victor a text that said, Victor, I had this really strange encounter. This thing that happened in 2015 with me and your sister in the land, it happened. There's a ship that actually landed. He goes, you're not going to believe this. He goes, I just had a CRV with my wife. His wife kind of gives him the grid points and all that stuff, the latitude, the longitude of the location, the specific date of the event, and then he goes into the remote viewing process. So he did that, and he sent a target sheet on what happened, and there were actually 3 ships that were there. 2 were hovering above us, and 1 had landed and picked the 3 of us up and took us to Arcturus star system, and then brought us back at 11:30. And it's interesting because he used to do this gentleman used to do remote viewing for the police department. Then he got really too involved in it and decided not to do it. So he's very well at doing this. So now what he can do is kind of recall in certain points in time, because, you know, that's what it's all about, is tapping into that. And so he tapped into that point in time the night that I had tapped into it by a visitation, and he wrote all this down. It's very interesting because it's like verbatim. They talk about specific things, these men in white robes that greeted us when we boarded the ship, all of this stuff. And I had listened to the Mount Shasta and Enrique, your talk last week, Grant, and I didn't want to say anything. I was listening to you guys, and it was interesting because they talked about the white robes, and then there's many other things they talked about that run parallel to what I have experienced, but a lot of it, the symbolization, I get a lot of symbols, and some of the symbols that they had picked up on their, that they had seen in the cup. I remember them saying as these symbols were showing up in this cup. I had seen them in my visions. I had written them down years ago, and it's fascinating that I have those drawings. And so it's all of this is related, you know, to consciousness and understanding that if you really want to access this, it's much easier to do it than people believe, and it's much more conducive to interact and easier to interact with non-human intelligent beings than it is to make contact with human beings that actually want to engage in true contact with ETs, because this isn't about us being curious. This is about us understanding ourselves and understanding the nature of consciousness and the purpose of us being here in this life. Okay, and the protection of Gaia, obviously, is a very key factor that I've learned through them, through these teachers. So that's the important aspect that I've learned through the years of contact and being on ships and all this other stuff. But the interesting part is I have the documentation that backs all this stuff. But I've reached out to Buddy. You know who Buddy is, Grant.
Yep.
You know, I've sent him stuff. Nobody really seems to kind of reach out to Paula Harris. Everybody, Greer. Nobody seems to care about what they have or what I have, other than what they have. And I find it very interesting that as a researcher, wouldn't you want to know this information? I have voices coming through. I mean, don't they want to hear these voices?
Well, maybe I should interview you and do a separate podcast with you, and just to put it on the YouTube, because I'll get, you know, a few thousand hits where you can, because that's the important part. It's like there's so many experiences, there's so many people with contact now. It's almost like getting hard to get your message out there because there's just so many messages. Yours seems to be quite a critical protocol that you've developed, and that it seems to be reliable for you to pick this stuff up. So I think your message is important, and I can help you try to get it out.
Well, I just think that what's happening now is that it's not so much the whole disclosure thing is they're there. We all know that pretty much. I don't know why we're waiting for anybody in power and government to tell us that they're there. We should all know that they're there. They've been there for millions of years. They're going to continue to come after we're way gone. The fundamental thing to take from all this is that how we decide to evolve as a species collectively. And if we do, we can do that with them or without them. And of course, the right choice is to do that with them. But what I'm getting as I progress in my evolution and ascension and understanding of all this is the orbs that come through. It's very strange. I'm getting stuff that I would like to send to you because I sent this to Buddy, and Buddy said he's never seen anything like this. I've sent it to Mary Rodwell. She does not. I mean, everybody I've sent it to has never seen any of this orb stuff that I have, but yet nobody has any kind of understanding of it, which is fine. I get that because a lot of it is very, very intense what I have. But I mean, there's faces, there's shapes, there's ships, I mean, in my home, there's ships flying, hovering through. And it's really insane. So yeah, if you would like to set up a time, private chat me and I'll email, I can send you my email and we can go over this stuff. But I think it's time people start seeing some of this stuff.
I appreciate it. Anybody got any questions for Alfred?
Yes. Alfred, I'd like to know the beings in the white robes that you saw.
Yes.
Were they, can you describe the being?
Well, if you want, I don't know how long we have on Zoom, but I actually have the transcript on my email, and I can read it to you. It's about 6 minutes long of when Victor CRV'd the event in March, the same night that I had the contact experience with the being from the ship. Victor, went out of body and he remote viewed this. And I don't know if most of you are familiar with remote viewing or not. It's basically being in 2 points in space or time. It's bilocating or trilocating. But so even back to that date in 2015, I could read you the manuscript if you want, 5-6 minutes, and it explains the event. If you don't, then I can just send it to you sometime, Grant. You can put it on your podcast.
Yeah, I was just curious if they were human, if they looked human.
No, they did not look human. No.
Can you describe what they look like?
6 to 7 feet tall. Their skin is pale white, and you could see they're almost like a translucent kind of color, transparent. And the reason I say translucent or parent is because you can see their veins. They're almost a bluish red color. They wore robes, white robes, and not all of them. The ones that greeted us wore the robes. They're very curious, very thoughtful and friendly. And I don't remember a lot of the interaction. They had oval heads. They had wide spaced eyes, big round eyes, but they looked more human than non-human. They didn't look like your typical gray with the large cranial. Their heads were just a little bit larger than human. Let me bounce back to 97. I had a near-death experience in 97. 2 weeks before that near-death experience, I was on an elevator, just got out of a business meeting on the 4th floor, and I was the only one on that elevator. I turned to my right, and all of a sudden this woman was in white. She's standing there. She was taller than me. She's probably 6'1", and she's very pale. And she had big brown eyes, dark brown eyes. And she looked at me, and then telepathically, she said, "Don't worry, everything will be all right." And without me even saying anything, we got to the bottom level, the lobby. I turned around, and I said, "Excuse me, what did you mean?" There was nobody there. 2 weeks later, I died, near death, and I came back, and she's been with me ever since on the ships. She greets me on the ships. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I agree with so much of what you said in terms of this, not being about curiosity. That
No,
there's definitely information coming in to experiencers, I believe, that has to do with helping us to wake up. And I think there's such a variety of experiences in people because it all has to do with your individual frequencies, your individual place, you're in your own evolution. And then there are also those kinds of experiences that happen in which there are multiple witnesses and there's physical evidence and they seem to be about a particular thing they're trying to show, like having to do with synchronicity, or what Grant was talking about earlier, having to do with memory, in the case of some musicians and so forth, and then having to do with whatever the people present are needing to or possibly open to receive about consciousness that's trying to come through.
Right. So if I could jump in for a minute, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking of something. So after all of this happened, when I was on a ship once, they were doing something. I asked them what they were doing. and one being looked at me and telepathically projected just a strand of the DNA system, and that there was an adjustment being made. And I started having these visitations at night. These were not dreams. I was actually awake, and these beings would come to me. And I'm going to give you a good example of how this has brought me into a higher frequency and vibration. In 2017, I was in bed, and this being came over me. It was black. This being was a black robe, and the face was lit up, and it kept saying "Mamata, Mamata, Mamata." Now, I don't know what Mamata means, but I Googled it. If you Google Mamata, it's Hindu for love of the mother, okay? So the next morning I'm at work, I go to work, and that's all she would say, and I just would listen to her. I didn't, try and talk to her, connect with her. I just would listen to her. That's all she would repeat was love of the mother, love of the mother. I go to work, I go to a business lunch. After lunch, I'm sitting in my parking lot at the office, and I go, something just tells me, go see mother, go see mother. I go to my mother's house. I go to the front door, I knock on the door, no answer. I go around to the back of the door, knock on the screen door, no answer. I look inside, I didn't see her. I knocked again, no answer. I called, no answer. I said, maybe she's sleeping. Well, I'm back into my car. I put it in reverse. The car stopped, said, go see mother. I said, okay, something's going on. I'm too intuitive to know something isn't happening. I called her again. She picked up. She was out of breath. I go, what's wrong? She goes, I can't breathe. I went to the front door. She opened the door. She collapsed and had a heart attack in my arms. And I saved her life. She was in the hospital. She had a 99% blockage in the main artery to her heart. So that's one example of them connecting me to other realms and being more in tune, intuitive to the other realities in this reality is they came to show me this in the future. So you have to be, I have many examples of this. I had somebody come to me from 1592 as an energy that came to me from Granada, Spain. I said, I don't know who you are. She said, you need to come to this time. I went back there. I found out later through another reading, I'll tell you what the reading was later, why I was sent there. And then, just all these experiences. So it's not just, and Greer has talked about this, Grant, about you have to understand that the ETs have this ability because of their technology and their expansion and their consciousness and their intellect to interact in the etheric realms, right? In the realms of the ether. Okay, so, and we know that there's not just ET beings in those etheric realms. There's causal, there's astral, there's light beings, there's ascended masters, there's all kinds of energies that interact in these etheric realms. So what's happened is that I'm getting bleed through from not only extraterrestrial civilizations, but I'm getting bleed through from other realities, other dimensional beings, other parallel universal beings. So this is all coming together, and it gets kind of messy to determine and ascertain and discern what is ET and what is other dimensional, and it's all been benevolent. It's all been positive. Nothing's been negative, but I can tell what's on a more of a ET level and what's more on an energetic level that is not ET but still is a benevolent thing. And it's interesting that I have documentation of both. I have documentation of the ET end of it, and I have documentation of etheric realm end of it. And the way I got to understand this was that recently somebody turned me on to somebody that does Akashic readings. And Grant and anybody on here, I'm sure you've heard of Akashic readings. That's reading the record of your soul.
Yeah.
So I've had 4 sessions. In the first session, this woman, I'm not going to tell her name, but she's well known. She's one of the top 5 in the country. She's been doing this over 20 years. She said, I can tell you right now, our Akashic record keepers are saying that you can bilocate. You're a transmitter from the earth to the ethers and from the ethers to the earth. And everything that you're doing is happening to you. You're like a Harry Potter. You can jump in and out of space and time. And I said, yeah, I know this. But she was validating this up before I would even ask her questions. Okay. The third session, she said, you've seen Thoth. Thoth was a Greek god, okay, from, not a Greek god, excuse me, Egyptian god lore from the Egyptian time period, and also from the Atlantean time period. He was believed to be a leader and intellect in the Atlantean times. So I said, that's really interesting, because that was my next question. I said, plus, I just had in September of last year, in my meditation, I have a meditation room, I had this grant you talk about in the Zendra thing, because that is also brought up in that target, that CE5. There was a Zendra drone that came over us, and my friend discusses that, but he doesn't watch your stuff, so he wouldn't have known that. I've never discussed that with Victor. But the Zendra smoke enters my room, in my meditation room, and all of a sudden these orbs start coalescing and interacting within this energy of this smoke. It's like a hazy smoke. And then all of a sudden this arc comes through, and it's like a portal, and this being comes in and looks at me. And of course he's distorted. It's not going to be like you're looking at a TV screen. And I took a picture of it, and I've got this on video, the whole 2.5 minutes of this interaction of this energy developing in this being coming through this portal. And I sent this, I think, to Buddy, the picture of it, and he goes, wow, that's really interesting. But like, again, if you haven't experienced it, how do you experience it? How do you convey this to somebody that's never experienced this? Like, there's things that you guys have experienced that I would never understand because I haven't experienced it. So to get the message out there, how do you do that? Where people will say, yeah, I understand, that's possible, I see that. How does that happen?
Wonderful, beautiful. We're going to do an interview. You got an amazing contribution, I think, to make to what's actually going on here in terms of consciousness and beings and how reality actually works. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, Alfred.
Well, Grant, real quick, Grant, can you send me an email of how to contact you?
I've sent you a private message on the chat. I've sent you a private message on chat. If you go to the chat part of the thing.
Yeah, I'm on my phone. I'm traveling right now, so let me see. Send me an email.
If you go to the chat.
Grant, I'm just gonna send you my email name right now.
Yeah.
And this way you have it. Then you can reach out to me, and I'll put my phone number.
Okay, good. We'll be in touch. I think Greg has a question.
Oh, I was gonna. Oh, Aurora, did you want to say something? I've been talking a lot.
Oh, I just said I want to see his video.
Yeah.
If he interviews with Grant, I would like to see what he has.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah, I was just going to share with everybody another angle into this whole business that Alfred's kind of opened up here with going back to 1592 in Spain and having visitors from there and and stuff like that. In the mid 1980s, I spent a year in what's called past life therapy. I don't know if you've heard of that, but anyway, the attitude of the therapist is that everything that you see in your inner world as an image or a vision is actually a communication from some past life you have lived. And the technique is very powerful. So just for example, I suddenly found myself during a session that I was a knight riding on a horse, and we were in the midst of a battle somewhere probably in Europe. And swords are swinging and horses are neighing and all this stuff. And all of a sudden I felt something touch me on the back of my neck. And the next thing I knew, I was watching the view of the world rolling around because apparently my head hit the ground and I had been decapitated. So, of course, the past life therapist said that that actually happened to me in a past life. Well, from a Jungian point of view, it would say that I need to, dim my logos, my brain, and let other centers of knowing, like the belly brain down here, have a say in my inner life. So I understood it that way. So all I'm saying is, Alfred, there's a lot of ways to understand a lot of your experiences, and I just wanted to share that.
Well, I appreciate that, your input, but I don't think that it was the 1592 wasn't that I lived there. It was me to go back. What I was told through the Akashic record was that because of my sacred abilities, that I was brought back there to release some negative event that happened, and souls were trapped, and to help guide those souls and release them. That's what they told me. So I'm just letting you know that. But there was something else I was going to.
Yeah, no problem.
Going to say.
I don't want to try to interpret your stuff, but.
Oh no, and I don't either. And I don't know if the Akashic records are right or not. I'm just. You know, I was interested. Carl Jung referred to all this, the Akashic records and all that. He called it the collective unconscious, and that, and that the psyche, in other words, draws on any and all things from all of history, and before history, recorded history, to conjure up images that will mirror back to you some aspect of your own soul that is struggling for consciousness in you, and so that you become. Okay, but let me interject. And the being that came to me the night before my mother died, you're telling me could that be my subconscious or my consciousness?
That would
seeing that.
Yeah, that would.
I find that.
Well, Jung would call that the anima, but you know, it's your higher self. It's your higher eros self that's communicating with you.
Well, it could be your higher self, or it could be somebody else. Why would I tell myself Lamata in a foreign language?
Because the unconscious speaks in a foreign language. You have to learn it. It's all symbolic.
Okay, well, let me tell you this. So the night of that event in the field where we have it on recording of the ship 15 feet from us, and we didn't even know it was there, or that we went on a ship. The voice said Sila Bhuvan. Sila Bhuvan in Hindu means there is one world, there is one people, there is one heaven. Are you telling me that subconsciously we said that and the ship came down? That's I don't see it that way. That was them speaking. It wasn't us speaking.
It's a message from the other side. It says we're from the Unus Mundus, the one world.
Okay,
can I ask a question?
Well, I think they are related to the ship, though. There's got to be a correlation between that event and that voice. Don't you agree?
Yeah,
I mean, it was on the tape.
But Alfred, I don't think this is a place to sort this out. I'll send you my email if you're interested, and we can chat offline.
Aurora wanted to talk.
Well, I had a question about Alfred speaking in another language. Did you actually record this?
I didn't speak in another language. What I'm saying is, three of us were sitting there at a land doing a meditation, and a ship came down, and a voice said, Silela Bhuvan. Now, you could Google it. That means in Hindu, it means there is one world, one heaven, one people. I didn't say it. It's not my voice. It's not Victor's voice. It's not his sister's voice. So that's not a subconscious or conscious reaction by me or anybody in the group. It's a connection through consciousness on a universal level. That's what that is. That's not anything to do with me or the three of us. It's a collective unity and consciousness contact event.
Yeah, that would be that'd be the way I would understand.
I guess my question is, did you hear that with your ears, or did you record
No.
that?
Yeah, it's recorded, but we didn't hear it. No, nor did we see the ship. Like I said, all I saw was a flash in the sky that looked like a white bulb that imploded, and it was large, and it was right over us. And then it's funny because if you saturate, because I didn't have a nighttime camera, so you have to oversaturate the footage. When you oversaturate it, right after I say that, the ship's already in the sight, and we didn't even see that. It was there. 2 minutes later, you hear these sounds. They sound like wild monkeys all around you. And we're like, I'm saying they're here. They're the presence is here. Mm-hmm. And the ships are already there, and they're looking at it. You can see it being a side profile of the being through this viewing window. And I got a picture of him. I mean, and then outside the ship, you can see a face, a guy standing up. I mean, if you guys want to see it, I got it on my phone. You can look at it. It's trippy.
Okay.
It's just unbelievable.
Okay, so I guess my question is, so you did not hear that you did not hear that voice, but it was recorded. Is that what you're saying?
I heard I did not hear the voice audibly through my ears. I heard it through the digital recording afterwards.
Exactly.
Also, but we heard the sounds. The sounds was to let us know on a different frequency, on a lower frequency, that they were here. Because we were not at a frequency where we could be there to interact with them yet.
Yeah,
they were setting up the area.
Yeah, I'm very interested in your stuff because I have similar stuff. I have recordings, and
cool.
it's really
Okay.
strange, very strange stuff. But it's a long story.
Well, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. Well, send me your, if you want, send me your private chat, your email, and I'll email you back.
All right.
Looks like we have to interview Aurora too.
Well, I'll just say I woke up. I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit. I didn't know what was going on with me, or had really no idea that anything was going on until 2013 when I kind of woke up. And it started one night when I bolted up out of the bed and my eyes were in excruciating pain. I couldn't open my eyes. There were water and fluid just pouring out of my eyes and my nose. And I was freaking out, and I ran in the bathroom. I was splashing my face, trying to get it to go away and stop. So I went to the doctor the next day, the eye doctor, and they said I had acute corneal erosion, and she wanted to know what I got in my eye. And I told her nothing. You know, I didn't get anything in my eye. I was asleep. So it was so bad that what I did the next night is I turned the recorder on my iPad because I thought maybe I was moving in my sleep. You know, you hear stories of people sleepwalking and doing all kinds of stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I'm hurting myself, you know. So I recorded all night. And when I listened back,
what eye was it, Aura?
it's my left eye.
Okay.
So, well, it was at the time, it was both eyes with this experience, but it was my left eye having most of the problems. And she found a scar on my left retina, and she wanted to know how I injured my eye. And I said, well, I've never injured my eye. And she showed me the scar. But anyway, so I started recording to see how I was hurting myself in my sleep. And that's when I discovered on the recordings that there was other things going on that I had no idea were going on. It's almost like I was in another environment. And there's voices, there's beings, there's myself speaking and breathing, sleeping at the same time. It's almost like I'm in two places. So that went on, and I've got just tons of that stuff. I speak in other languages, and I don't speak any other language besides English. But it all later, I'll just lead up to the current point where I do communicate with a being. And I record the sessions, I ask questions, and it answers me. So that's where I'm at right now.
Hey, Aurora?
Yeah.
Aurora, real quick. Have you had physical touch with them? Have you actually touched them? Because I have touched them. I'm curious to know, and if anybody on here, when I touch their hands and they touch my hands, their hands feel like talcum powder. They're very soft.
Okay, well, I haven't touched them, but they've touched me, and it felt like a feather, very light, like a feather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been in experiences. I've been in other places. I've never been on a ship that I know of, but I've been in, I think was underground in a huge cavern. I've been under a light that was alive, that communicated and transferred something into my brain. It was the craziest thing you can imagine. But I did find something in my eye, and this is why I was interested in the other guy that was talking about the symbols he saw. And this is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a lacuna in my left iris, and inside of it is this object. It's hard to see because I blew this up and you can't hardly see it, but I did draw it. I did trace over it, and it almost looks like a symbol. This is it. And I was wondering if anyone has ever seen anything like this.
As a symbol. At what o'clock position is that in the eye?
It looks just like this if you look at the eye. This is what it looks like. This is the actual.
So is that at around the 2 or 3 o'clock position?
It is about in the, no, it's in the, I want to say maybe 7 o'clock position, 8 o'clock position.
Okay.
Because this is my pupil right here, the edge of my pupil, and then that's it right there.
Yeah, have you ever studied iridology?
No, but I contacted an iridologist who,
there you go.
because I had never seen anything like it, and it's a long story what led me to find this. It was through somebody else that asked some strange questions.
Could you hold the image up one more time, and I'll do a screen save, and I'll I'll take a look at it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I did contact an iridologist, and he happens, I'm in North Carolina, and he's in the North Carolina mountains, and he has a school in Taiwan. So I thought, well, I'm going to send this to this iridologist and just see, you know, I'll probably never hear back from this guy, but I'm going to send it anyway, just maybe they'll contact me. And within 2 hours, I got an email back from this guy, and he wanted to see me. So he wanted to see me within 2 weeks because he was going to Taiwan, and I went there. And he at first told me he had never seen anything like this before. And then after I got there and we talked and everything, he told me that he had seen it one other time in his 30 years. And he said, do you want to know what I told my secretary when I first saw this? And I said, what? And he said, I told her that's the mark of someone who's been abducted by aliens.
Oh, we don't call it abduction.
Well,
what's that?
but
and I had not told him anything of what was happening to me.
So that was your left eye.
Left eye.
At the 7 o'clock position. Well,
Yeah,
your iridologist should
7
have.
or 8, yeah, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, but you know, the iridology is all about. It's a pattern showing what part of your body is in that area. So did he tell you what part of your body was in that area where that symbol appeared?
We didn't get into any of that.
Yeah, that would be
He
important.
wanted that, and he wanted the original photographs. I gave him everything, and he took it with him.
And he never got back to you. Well, see, he didn't want to understand the symbolism of what part of your body could that be referring to. And
Aurora.
if I remember right, I think it might be the heart or a leg, but I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Aurora, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm April. I had a similar experience with my eye a couple of years ago, and they were putting clear contacts on my eyeball, and they said I had corneal dystrophy, and I was literally going blind. So here, I'll start video. So I was really going downhill in my health, and my eye, it was my right eye. So I went to this electromagnetic frequency treatment called Audimed. And I said, my eye, you know, it's just horrible. And it was leaking all the time. And I saw all these eye doctors. Anyways, we applied a frequency to my eye. And there's the practitioner that operates the frequencies. And he had a technician with a handheld device. So he put it to my eye. And all of a sudden, I like, oh my God, there's something creeping on my eye. I could literally feel it moving on my eyeball, and the technician says I can see it, and it was a foreign object that came out of my retina. And
wow.
and now my eyes totally healed. I can see. I couldn't even drive at night. I was literally going blind. So
Did you
there's
keep
no
it? Did you
explanation.
keep it?
So
Did you keep it
I
clean?
met with a psychic in London who's very familiar with this kind of thing. And he suggested that it was an Orion implant.
A
So
what?
Orion implant.
An Orion implant.
That's his take on. He was like, oh, he says those are so curious. He says they have bio material in them, and I guess that's why I could feel it moving. Anyways, I got it out, and I had to share that with you because maybe that's similar. It's
Well, this thing
little
is still in
square.
my eye because it's embedded in my iris.
Mine was
coming
embedded.
out. But the weird thing about it, and this is the strange part, it's only visible when my pupil is dilated to a certain diameter.
Well, how the electric magnetic.
If it's not dilated to that diameter, you can't even see it because I photographed it and it's closed.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
But
So,
if it's a foreign object, it would have a different electric magnetic frequency than your own than your own body. So that can be tested to see if it's a foreign. But it does have, if it's the same thing that I had, it has some bio thing. And anyways, I'm glad I got rid of it. And who knew?
April, maybe send me the contact that you use, that I can send it to Aurora, and maybe she can follow up on that.
Yeah, there's Health Canada actually has okayed this particular treatment called ONDAMED, ONDAMED, and there's practitioners all across Canada and the United States. So you want to find one that is intuitive too and open-minded. And yeah, so I've learned everything's a frequency. And yeah, I wanted to ask people's help. I'm having, I was on Facebook yesterday, and there's this Facebook group called UFOs Over Canada. And this person reported in the news, Vancouver, Ireland, that they and 6 other people had seen this big orange orb UFO thing come flying through the group, and they had a big long story. And that night I also saw it, and it was here in my neighborhood, and it was hanging over the mountain. And I was thinking, wow, that could be a planet, right? So then I turn around, I take a picture of it, and I turn around, it's gone. So when I saw the posting, I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe this is hitting Vancouver Island over the place. But for me, it's really getting intense. I go out at night, and there's flying objects out there, and I'm standing there in my driveway, and I'm talking to them. It's like, why don't you guys, come down? I get photographs, and for me, photographs is a validation that what I'm seeing is real.
So where are you, April? April?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Yeah, where are you? What
I'm
city?
in Comox Valley, Vancouver Island.
Okay, I'm in Victoria.
I know. I've
That's
seen lots of UFOs in Victoria, and lots of orbs and lights, and
so
people are with me.
how far were you from where they were seeing the UFOs, the orange one?
In the news.
Oh, you saw it in the news.
No, they were in the news.
Yeah, they were in
reporting
the
that they
news.
saw it, and I saw it here.
Yeah, but how far away are you from where they were being reported being seen?
The news is between Victoria and my area. On the island.
How far?
It would
Miles.
take me 2 hours to drive there.
So it's 60 miles, 70 miles?
I don't know.
Okay, something like that. Okay,
I
thank
go
you.
by, it takes me 2 hours to drive there. That's all I know.
Well, yeah, okay, thank you. So it's in your neighborhood anyway.
It's on Vancouver Island. No, the news is like halfway between you and me. I'm on Kovacs Valley in Central Ireland. So I'm seeing flying objects every single day now. And I almost feel like I'm being stalked. Like this one, it's like a twirly one with all kinds of lights. And it even is out there when there's clouds, overcast, it's hanging out there. And I'm looking at it, what are you doing? Like, what's the deal? And then right off to the left, it will flash, like a light bulb flash. And I have recordings, there's like 3 of them, and I don't get it. Like, I'm saying, okay, like, come and talk to me, you know, why am I seeing all this? And I'm really questioning if half the things I'm seeing are I think some are physical. I'm starting to nickname them, like the different varieties that I see. And so the orange orb one, it's huge. I've seen a ship come out of the mountains, unbelievable size. Now, in my area, it's like really high security. So I don't understand how other people aren't seeing it. And am I having communications? I have no idea. I'm demanding to have, you know, communications. And then when I look at my videos, there are communications, but it's strange. Like, it happens in 1 second. Like, they're in and out. I've been bonked on the head by some kind of rod thing. So when I go outside now, I tell them they can't bonk me on the head. I have, you know, video proof that this is happening to me. And I don't understand it. You know, I just don't.
Well,
There's so many
It's
out
hard to
there.
understand. I think everyone's trying to understand this stuff.
Yeah, the first thing to understanding, I think, April, is to not take these things literally, but try to understand them symbolically. So, for example, the orange orb, I would connect with the color of the second chakra in your body, in your subtle body. So it's like asking you to enter your second chakra, which is the other center of knowing. It's the center of the feminine knowing. It's not the center up here of the brain or of the logos. It's the center of the eros knowing. It's like you're being called to enter that center, and you do that through meditation, like several people here have noted. They have various ways of entering into that place where you can make contact. So I don't know if that's.
I don't know. I've been trying to make contact. You know, like literally, there's, you know, what Alfred explained and Amar and, you know, like what they described, I can totally relate to a lot of, not totally relate, but a lot of things. So it's,
how did you make contact, or how are you trying to make contact?
I'm not. That's the thing. I complained to them. I said, well, how come you're out there? How come you don't come down and talk to me if I see you all the time? What's the deal? Like, are you stalking me or like?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because after I discovered what was happening to me, I was scared to death. I'm not going to lie. I was scared to death. It took me a long time to get over the fear. And then I started approaching the contact method that I use now. And I use what I call EVP, because I'm like an antenna. Your body is an antenna. It's your bioelectromagnetic field. I call it the BIM field technology. And I'm not going to go into all that here, but it's their technology. It's how they take you and do things at the subtle level. You know, it's not like the movies where, you know, you have all this crazy stuff. It's very subtle. It's so subtle that you don't even know it's happening. And
it's on an astral level. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what they told me is that not the consciousness, but the conscience. Conscience collects light over time. I don't know what that means, but that's what they told me. And this being that's connected to my BIM field or my biofield, whatever you want to call it, soul, it's through coherent light. And coherent light is light that is in phase. It's kind of like if you look at laser technology, you know, they use coherent light. It's a perfected kind of in-phase light. And that's how it's working with me. But I don't know if anybody else is having these kind of experiences.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
there's a
I know what you're
science
talking
to
about.
it. It's not magical stuff. It's not weird
Yeah.
stuff. It's real science involved.
Yeah, I think actually Grant had an experience of coherent light or laser light. He mentioned the last time I heard him interview somebody that when his Charlie Red Star hovered above a fence, it didn't light the fence. There was no light. Normally you would see a glow, you know, and I thought to myself afterwards, I said, but that must have been a laser light. It must have been a coherent light source that UFO was emanating. So it kind
Well,
of
I can make a short comment on that. And you hear about this on the ship. We called it a dead light. It was along the side of a railing of a bridge, and it was about 2 inches from the railing of the bridge, but it didn't light up the bridge. It was so bright you couldn't look at it, and yet it wasn't casting any light. So we used to call it a dead light. But you hear this, people are on the ship where they talk about a room is lit up, but the light doesn't leave the room. It's like it stops right at the door, as if it's made out of some sort of
It's alive. Well, yeah,
yeah,
the
it's
light
alive.
is alive.
You would
Yes,
assume
yes,
that the light would move into the other room. So when I hear these people describing this, that the other room is lit up, but the light isn't coming into their room, I'm going, that's the same thing I saw. It was this weird property, or people describe in the ship that there is no lighting fixtures and that the light seems to come from everywhere. That there is no lighting
Yes.
fixtures.
Yes, it's a
Yeah,
permeating light. Yes.
Yeah, when I was on a ship once, I went up and actually asked if I could touch the wall, and they said, yeah. They looked at each other, nodded, and my hand touched the wall and went into the wall. And I looked at them, and they just kind of looked and at me with these eyes, and I said, okay, I understand. It's them. You know, the ship is them. They're interacting with their consciousness as the ship's technology is interfacing with them. So it's like they're biomechanical ships. So they're alive. And that's part of the light source is the consciousness of the beings. I mean, their hearts, their consciousness are interconnected to the ship. So when they light up at night, when you make the intention to, once you've made that contact and you see a ship above you and you say, please illuminate or light up, and they phase up, they do a photonic interaction with you where they light up, that is actually the beings inside the ship are lighting their hearts up and their consciousness up to interact with you photonically through light. So that's a form that they've taught me of contact, and it's a simple form. And I know Grant's discussed this before, and I've caught a couple of his video or his lectures where he talks about the light that people see on ships is just for amusement. And I have to say it's not for amusement, Grant. There's purpose for everything. There's no such thing as coincidence. And the different colors of lights that we see when the ships come in, it's based on the properties of the ship, different types of ships, different civilizations, and the purposes of why they're interacting and the way they're interacting. It all relates to that. The color, lighting, everything does. The tonality, it's all one with consciousness. And that's what creates it. And there's nothing to fear. Right, but there's nothing to fear. Everybody's this word abduction has got to go away, you guys. It's got to be interaction. They're not here to abduct us, okay? They're here to interact with us, and they're waiting for us to grow up, waiting for us to get on a level so we can be a type 1, type 2 civilization, so we can transcend and go into the stars with them instead of doing what we're doing on this planet, which is insanity. We all have to agree to that. So there's nothing to fear but the humanity, and where humanity has taken us, that's what we should be fearing, not the people above us, okay, or around us that we can't see, but the people that we can see that are destroying Gaia, the planet. I mean, can we all agree on that concept?
I really don't know what they're doing yet. So I can't say with certainty.
I like the big
I'm trying
question
to find
is,
out, but I don't know
who's
yet.
they? You know, like when you, that's the big question. Who's they? If you believe these researchers and Clifford stating there's like 57 different kinds of aliens interacting with Earth.
There's more than that. There's more than that.
Yeah.
I was on a ship.
I'm sure there is, and there's
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 thousands. I mean,
also
there's
interdimensional, and I think
right.
that somehow I don't have control over my consciousness altogether.
Well,
And
you do. Universal law requires free will, so you have control
yeah, if
over
you
that.
have free will, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these
Well, you
terms
have-
don't really
you
matter
have
in what's
free will.
happening. I can tell you that. It's all got to do with energy and information. We live in we're material bodies, but our bioelectromagnetic fields are not material, but they're inhabiting these containers, and they can be shared by
course.
others, and that's happening right now too. But what I can say is that it's information, and information is carried within light, which is energy, and they can take. People call it a soul. I call it a BEM field, which is a bioelectromagnetic field. And when they interact with that, they don't do anything with your body. Now, electrostatics is involved. I don't know if anybody's been taken like that, where they just take your electromagnetic
Consciousness.
field, but you'll feel a shock. It's weird. You hear a sound, and then you'll have an electrostatic shock. With me, it's going to my lip.
Yeah.
And that's when they're getting ready to take that.
I think
part
that's
of
when
it.
they hit you, that rod thing I was telling you about. It's like
I don't
pops
know.
something and it hits you on the top of the head. Or that's what I interpret from my video.
In my case, it's been an electrostatic shock, and or an energy that flows through the body after a shock. But you know it's happening because you feel the electrostatic shock.
Right.
You hear this noise like an electrostatic
Like
discharge.
a pop? I get a pop
It's
sound.
really weird.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but and then you're out.
You don't feel good. Nope.
But then
And people don't.
here's what I think what's happening, because in my recordings that I have, I hear myself breathing like I'm asleep, but I'm also talking and like having conversation with something in the background. I'm in another environment. I hear music. I hear bell sounds, weird sounds. It's
I'm conscious
the
when I'm
strangest
doing
thing
that.
I've ever encountered in my life.
Yeah. I'm conscious when I'm out there with my camera. I really need to get a better one. But anyways, so yeah, there's like, I think it's a interdimensional world, an extra-dimensional world. I think there's physical ETs. And then I think humanity has its own kind of thing happening too. So.
Well, there's so many alien entities.
I know. So who are they? Right.
They're unique to you, the ones that appear, because they're parts of your soul that you have yet to integrate.
Maybe not. I don't believe that. I don't think so.
Well,
Well,
it seems
it
like
doesn't matter
people
what
see.
you believe.
It
They're
seems like
that's
people see
your
the
opinion.
same things. I've seen the one I interact with, the one connected with me, is what they call a mantis being. I mean, it looks like an insect. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was going to die when I first saw it, because I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah, they're real mantis.
But then I got over that fear over time,
Well, an insect is a sure sign that you need to go down to the belly brain, because insects have very little brains. And the Bushmen in South Africa, their god was mantis, the praying mantis, because mantis would always bring them dreams and show them how to live. So it's all connected.
Yeah,
it's all connected, but I think it's really hard for me to compare a Gaia insect with a extraterrestrial. Like, yeah.
Well, it's extraterrestrial and alien at the same time, right? So whatever you have alienated or alienated from is bound to appear as an alien of some origin or some species or some unknown species. So it's just information about a part of your soul that wants contact and hopes to get more of your energy to be integrated.
Well, my daughter thinks it's a demon. I come from a Catholic background, and my family thinks I'm talking to demons. Seriously. We've had very bad issues over this. And well, when she heard the voices on the recording, when she heard the first time when I asked if it was an insectoid type being and it said I was, it scared the crap out of my daughter. She's scared to death of it. My friends are scared to death of it. They think I'm talking to demons. And I said, this is not demons. You know,
the proper word is Damien, and it means I'm almost 80 years old, so I can't.
It's the same place where we get the word deity from. It's the same derivative.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the weird thing is all these experiences have changed my outlook on all of that completely, and I don't practice anything anymore. As a matter of fact, I just not even sure any of that stuff has any meaning. I think the ignorance of planet Earth, I think there's a lot of ignorance here, and we're in such an infinitesimal stage of evolution. I just think it's a lot of ignorance, and
I suggest that it's mind control, and we've been dumbed down. That our human potential
I try not to label, or I don't want to take away any. I mean, my youngest son he wants to be a priest. He's in college. He's getting ready to join seminary. So, it's weird.
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic too, Aurora, and so whatever's doing this, it's universal. It doesn't care. It just selects at random. It's like Johnny Appleseed going around throwing apple seeds, and if it falls on you, you're it. You got to heal yourself. So.
Well, I have to do, it's what I tell my family, because I don't try to convince them of anything. All I can do is share, and I've stopped doing that because it's such a negative impact. But I encourage my son, who's going to be a priest. I mean, I can quote the Bible. I can do all kinds of things. I know all that information. It's not like I don't know it. And I encourage them to continue, because I truly believe we're not all on the same path and in the same place at the same time. Information flow. I don't know if any of you know David Deutsch. He's a theoretical physicist from over in England at Oxford University. He's the big person on quantum computers right now. But when he talks about information flow in some of his lectures, I mean, it's very interesting. And it's all about how what I call the universal intelligence expresses itself through matter. And it uses matter to express itself in the same way as David Deutsch describes, how information moves through all these different mediums, like you might have a thought, and then that through voicing that thought, it moves through the vocal cords and expresses itself through the vocal cords. And then let's say you speak through a microphone, it travels that sound through the microphone into maybe a speaker, and then it's heard through the speaker. And all these mediums that this information is traveling through, but the one thing that never changes is the information itself. It's such a very subtle thought, to think about, and it's so true.
Yeah,
so, we're just a medium.
We're radio stations or receivers.
We're an antenna, right?
Yeah,
right.
We're at home here, and you can rotate the knob and change frequency and dial in different.
And you can. The interesting thing is you can record that, Gregory. It's recordable. I have it recorded. You can listen to it with your own ears and hear it.
Yeah, well,
that information is communicating through you, yes, and your antenna or your BIM field, I call it, it's like a modulator.
Yeah,
and that information gets modulated, and you can record it on.
You're on another channel. I'm not on that channel, but thanks for sharing.
Well,
Oh, by the way, that symbol is on the 4 o'clock. If I'm looking out, it's to my like 8 o'clock. But if you're looking at my face in my eye, it'll be in the 4 o'clock position, whatever that means.
I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say I had an experience back in 2008 where I had a visual thing, but there was nothing physical. It was all just visual. But I saw it with my eyes closed first, and it looked a little bit like your symbol, and it was right about, at this level, and it was just in my left eye. And I was seeing it with my eye closed, and then when I opened my eye, it appeared out in front of me. And then it was accompanied by a bunch of other symbols. It didn't have it was mostly the C, and then, that C shape, and then it didn't have that other part on it. But there were a lot of other visuals too, and that was an interesting experience because then all kinds of other stuff started to materialize there, and I thought I was having a stroke. I thought I was, yeah, right. I was something wrong with my brain. I was having something like that going on, but I got up and walked, and it stayed with me when I walked, and then I became afraid, and when I became afraid, it just stopped like that, and there was nothing else to it. But so anyway, I just want to share that part, but I wanted to share something else too. And thank you very much, Aura, for sharing all of that about your experience. It's just so interesting. And
there's too much really to share here. There's
so
much.
Right. I get that.
But I can't even go into it.
Yeah. Now I hope Grant does do an interview so that we can hear more about all of that. It's just fascinating, very interesting stuff. I just wanted to share a quick little experience that I had in 2010 because it relates, I think, to the general theme that we're kind of talking about, which is interdimensionality and ETs and that sort of thing. So I was at a shamanic retreat up in the mountains in Colorado, and the cabin where I was staying was a little ways off from the cabin where we were meeting to have the retreat activities. And so I rode over in the morning about 7 o'clock with one of the other attendees, and on the way we saw this UFO, and pretty clear that it was a UFO. It was hovering, and then it came down, and then it went sideways, and then it went, so pretty much a UFO. She had not seen anything like that before, and I had, and so she was pretty, freaked out. And she was like, "Well, let's just go ahead and get to the meeting." And and I wish I'd gotten out of the car and hung out there, but I went ahead and went back to the meeting with her. And then when we got there, told everybody, people got in the car, went back, of course it was gone. But then when we were inside, we were going to take these brain vitamins to help us, feed our brain for the things we were going to be doing. And so she had the bottle of pills, and she was dumping one into my hand, right? And it bounced off my hand onto the carpeted floor. And the floor carpet was about the same color as the pill, so it was hard to see. And I'm looking around for it, trying to find it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And so we're all looking around, well, where could it have gone? We're just standing right here. It had to fall out right here somewhere. So about, I don't know how much time passed, seemed like about 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes passed. And about 10 to 12 feet from where we were standing was the kitchen with a tile floor. And there was a table there, small, like a kitchenette kind of table. And both of us heard it. It was like, you can hear the sound. I mean, you can imagine the sound of a pill dropping when it hits the floor, what that sounds like. It almost always has the same kind of sound. It's pretty recognizable. So we heard the sound of this pill dropping, And it was the vitamin that she had dumped into my hand, only it was appearing, it was falling to the ground 12 feet away underneath the table, as if it had gone through the table. And yeah, and there was nobody standing around the table or anything. I mean, you know, there was like it didn't fall into somebody's pocket and then, you know, fall out over there, something like that. But to me, that was a message. And I thought it was interesting that that happened directly after, like within minutes of getting back to the house after going out, of seeing that UFO. So, you know, I made a connection with that. But it seemed to me to be a message about the displacement of time and space, the possibility of, you know, our reality not being quite what we think it is. And I think that that's a lot of what we're trying to connect with in terms of consciousness, in terms of coming into the realization that we are so much more than we think we are. So I think it happens differently for different people according, like I was saying earlier, to where you are in your own evolution or where you are in your own consciousness. That it happens different ways for people like that. But that the whole thing is about waking us up to our own interdimensionality, our own higher consciousness that we are, and just are awakening up to. So anyway, I just wanted
Yes,
to
consciousness is not limited to space or time.
exactly.
We know it's an omnipresent field of awareness. And
Right.
Einstein said that the entanglement, quantum entanglement, was known as a spooky effect, being in two places at the same time. Well, we all know that we're just energy, and energy can travel tridimensionally, transdimensionally, in any way you want it to travel. So once we understand that, we can break it down past the subatomic trickles and realize that we're just tonality and light. Then we are consciousness, and consciousness has been in us and around us for infinite number of years before time, just because time and space does not exist. So we've always existed. So extraterrestrials, are they part of some of them? Let's just look at this way. Are some of the extraterrestrials we interact with, are they us in the future? Possibly. Are we them in the past? Possibly. It's all interrelated and all interconnected. And for people to be afraid of any of this is just, it's beyond understanding for me, because it's part of our DNA. It's part of what we are. It's part of our cellular level and subatomic level, that we are, as conscious beings, we're universal. We're one, basically. There's a singularity, as everybody knows, all of this. And the singularity is consciousness. Schrodinger said that. The father of quantum physics said that. So we all have to just understand that the contact with ETs is for them, one, to remind us what we are, and two, to make the contact. And they're doing that through consciousness. And they're evolving our consciousness and assisting us in conscious evolution. So we all have to understand that. And once we do, then we have to look at each other and say, okay, are we ready to make that step forward? Are we going to consistently walk in circles and get on the stage and talk and do the circus and do nothing? Is it another bread and circus show? It's like TV programming. What's the difference if we just sit in these chat rooms and talk instead of actually fundamentally doing something to make the shift that's needed on this planet to elevate all of our consciousness so change can occur? It's not going to occur with 30 people on a phone. It's going to occur with at least the morphogenic field of one of the population on this planet to make that shift. We have to come together as a people of Earth to make that change. Not, going to lectures and the desert.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%, Alfred. And I also think that that it's important to not get too hung up on the minutia, too hung up on the kinds of experiences or the beings or any of that in order to grasp the bigger concept, the bigger picture of it's all about awakening. It's, that's the piece we need to get to. We need to embrace.
Yeah, that's where we need to get to, because if you look at where society is today, can we collectively say that we're in the right direction? I mean, if we're still talking about we're wanting disclosure, I mean, after all these years of knowing that there's been disclosure, it doesn't take a world leader, per se, in quotes, for us to know that there's disclosure, that ETs exist. It's not even about ETs, okay? That's a whole nother issue. It's about us as a human race collectively elevating our consciousness to a level where we can interact and move on, and Gaia can grow, and Earth can transcend and interact with these other civilizations, and they can come down and teach us, and we could teach them our ways. I mean, that's what it's about fundamentally. That's what it's always been about. But the Earth has to be willing to do that. They're not going to come and knock on our door. That's not how it works, and we know that. So the question is, why aren't we doing that? Grant, you're out there on the circuit. Why isn't that happening, Grant?
Fear. It's
Alfred, you have to remember.
Yeah, let's hear Grant. I'd like to hear Grant's answer to that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll let Aurora answer. I think basically the way I look at it, and I've said this numerous times, is that the only person you can really change is yourself. Like Aurora talked about this with your family. I think that's the basic pattern, is that our families don't want anything to do with this. There's a bunch of ignorant people running around. The only person we can really change is ourselves. I believe in a reincarnation world where we have made some sort of agreement to come in here to do something. And the only thing we can really do is what we thought we came in here to do. So we were born for a reason. We're here to do something. And all we have to worry about is, are we doing what we intended to do when we came in here, to lift consciousness, to shift things? And all we can really do is change ourselves, because when it's all said and done, we only get asked one question: how did it work out? Because it was us that made the plan. It was us that put it all together. And we can't, I even say, and people sometimes get upset, I say it really doesn't even really matter if somebody destroys the world. We're coming back to learn our lessons wherever we are. It really doesn't matter what happens around us. We always get upset with, Hillary or Trump or whatever. My mother-in-law, the dog, ate my homework, all this kind of stuff. And that really has nothing to do. All we can really do is change ourselves. And I say that you try to make your story public so that indirectly somebody hears it and it sort of rings a bell. But you can't really, I don't think we can really expect people to sort of get with the program, because they are where they are. We have to have empathy, where therefore for the grace of God go I. That if I hadn't had the UFO experiences in '75, the download experience in 2012 and 2016, I would probably be just as stupid as the rest of everybody else that's running around.
Well, Grant, let me ask you this. Grant, let me ask you this. If you feel at the end of the day this really doesn't have any value other than our own growth, individual growth, and that's we came here based on a contract, which I agreed to that to some degree. You've been doing this for how long, this research? How many years?
44 years.
Okay, and you've been doing the lecture circuit for a long time, okay? So what's the purpose and reason why you're doing it? Is it to assist in people coming together so that we can formulate a better system, a better shift in consciousness to shift society? Or is it just to enlighten yourself, your own evolution?
No,
you think that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Okay, it really is. It's really not about, in the end, about myself. It's what am I supposed to do? And I think it is to try to get it out. And I remember the first time when I did, even though I'm not for the disclosure thing, I did the Tom DeLonge thing a year before he became public. I knew about this guy. I knew this stuff was going to happen and stuff like that. And so when he went public in the New York Times, that's when I put out the updates. And that was when I got some of my YouTube videos got over 100,000 hits. And I'm thinking the thing is, what's the best I could do? So what I do is I try to get people like the people that are on here today to share their experience, that indirectly people will hear other people's experiences, and it rings the odd bell, or you fictionalize it, put it in Hollywood, because it's the old idea that in the end, a lot of times it's science advances, ufology, the world advances one funeral at a time, that in a lot of cases you really can't change people. So I found these indirect ways where you don't get in people's face, you don't confront people and say you're stupid, you're wrong, whatever. You just put it out there and hope that the right person hears it, and that it alters their world just a little bit. And so I always encourage people, the more people that share, that's how you raise consciousness, is you keep talking about it. It's like the African American movement. They made a lot of bad movies about African Americans and put them down and stuff, and it really doesn't matter whether it's good or it's bad. The more we talk about this, the more people talk about this, the more the consciousness rises, and it will eventually, people will decide in the end what is the right thing to do. People aren't stupid. It's the fact that people aren't talking about it that's not in the public consciousness. And so when I get, like I have this interview with Jo Wood, who was married to the guy from the Rolling Stones, and I'm going to tell her, you'll hear it very directly, I'm going to say, you've got this opportunity. They're not going to listen to Grant Cameron or to Alfred or Greg or people like that. A lot of times you get a person at her level that if they hear, okay, the Rolling Stones saw a UFO, or say the guy from Yes had an alien come through the wall and stuff like that, then people go like, wow, are you kidding? And so that to me is the thing, is I'm not trying to evaluate what I'm doing. I just think that the more we talk about it, the more we put this thing out, the more the consciousness will rise. It's like African American movement, any other. We are no different than any other social or political movement. We have to talk about it. We've got to get, it's like my friend Peter, who I interviewed, it's on my YouTube channel, where he made this famous expression, closets are for clothes. We have to get all these issues and the people out of the closet, and the more we talk about it, the more the light will go on with the odd person, and it'll slowly move. We've got an eternity to solve this thing, but we have to do what we can to put out our story and our understanding, and the odd person will pick it up, and it will raise the consciousness, and eventually we're going to get to the point, because when I started in 1975, you did not talk about UFO sightings. If you had more than one UFO sighting, they would lock you up. It was a random event. It was just something that you happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. We now know it's not a random event. People are interacting with these things. They're seeing numerous things. It's an interactive thing. If you've had an experience, you're probably a lifer. It's gone on your whole life. We're starting to understand this stuff. So from when I started in 1975 to now, let me absolutely guarantee you, it is a completely different world. What happened then does not happen now. We are a million light years ahead of where we were in 1975 in terms of understanding what this is. Even the idea of consciousness. I came out in 2012 talking about consciousness, and Jerry Pippin, one of the top UFO guys, said, I can't believe, Grant, you've done this. I can't believe you've gone from the nuts and bolts, from the presidential thing to consciousness. And I said, I didn't really do it. I was teleported. And nobody talked about consciousness before 2012. Now it's like the thing to talk about. And so we've made some progress, but it's people have to talk about their thing, and you have to, where it's not threatening, where you just tell the story and people sort of hear it. And the more people hear it, the more they suddenly realize, like, everybody's talking about this, and the people who aren't going to believe, they'll die, and will advance, because the young people will pick it up, and it'll be just common knowledge. But until you talk about it, until everybody's talking about it, the kids won't pick it up.
Well, it's like
I
Jung said,
totally agree.
Grant, it's like Jung said, this is going to take, this transformation of the human psyche on the planet Earth, he estimated was going to take 600 years. So we shouldn't be in a hurry. And I appreciate what you're doing, Grant, because you're acausal. You're saying, let's just throw all these stories out there, and like the internet, inevitably people will run into them, or fate will see to it that they will run into the story that touches them and bumps their little journey on a little further, and realize that this is a journey in becoming more conscious, which is what Jung talked about in his book of 1958 called Flying Saucers. So the idea of consciousness being connected with the UFO phenomena was instituted a long time ago, before it came into your consciousness there, Grant. But yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, and I think you're doing a great job. So
well, thanks, and I appreciate the stories. We'll shut this down in about 5 minutes, but I appreciate the stories, because when I hear stories like Alfred's story and Aurora's story today, I go like, wow, because it rings a bell with me. I go like, oh, I know what they're talking about here. They're on the right path. They've got a contact. I can tell they've got contact. And then I say, I think everybody should hear this person's story. I want to try to get this person's story out. because somebody else will say, you know, oh, I had that experience as well, and it encourages them to come forward and talk about it. And that's what I think it is. It's like
That's right.
the more the
That's
people
right.
talk about it, whether they talk
That's
about
right.
it good or bad or whatever, as long as people are talking about
Right.
it, it's like, you know, as long as they spell your name right, that's what it comes down to. It's
But
exposure.
Grant, I appreciate everything you said, and I agree with a lot of it. But a question for you. I agree that it is becoming more mainstream, but it is not becoming more mainstream media. Okay, that's the problem. That's the disconnect.
Okay,
And how do we get this in? How do we get this into the mainstream in the right way, not in the managed agenda way? You
okay,
know?
well that's why I'm saying
In the right way.
that's the thing where I think we've almost been given the internet by the intelligence to promote this, because you have as much power as the New York Times or the Washington Post or anybody else. Before, you could not go in the mainstream media, and I've dealt with a lot of these people. I've dealt with the Washington Post and
I know
Fox
you have.
News and all these people and stuff. And basically, you have to have empathy for them because they're doing 24/7 news. When you talk to a reporter, they know nothing, because when they say, "Oh, this reporter wants to do a story," I say, "What does he know about UFOs?" They knew nothing. Today they're going to do a story on UFOs.
Right.
Tomorrow they're doing a story on crossbred pedigree dogs or something. They're doing this 24. They haven't got time to research it. So it's up to you and I to move this story. And that's when I saw this thing with the 100,000 hits on YouTube, where I suddenly realized we've got the power that you can set something up where I can take a story here, somebody's story, and I can get like 10 or 20,000 people to hear that story. And so that's what I realized, that we've got the power to create this, and they can't stop you. The government can't stop you. The media can't
Right.
stop you.
Well, back up. It's not that they don't have the time to do this, because this is probably the most fundamental and most important topic and discovery ever to affect mankind. Right. So it's not that they don't have the time. It's that the powers that be above us will not allow the media to cover it. I mean, can you agree with that comment?
That's not my experience. I dealt with Billy Cox, who's written a blog he used to write for USA Today. He now writes for the Tampa Tribune. He said, my editor basically tolerates my stuff. He's nothing else. He's just not interested. He just doesn't see the point. And it's the same as if you have, like, your kid's got cancer. I mean, you're scrambling to try to get your kid into the media to try to get some sort of discovery for your kid or whatever. And that's why I'm saying we're no different than any other social or political movement. There's a lot of important issues on the table, like childhood cancer. Just because our story is important doesn't mean that everybody should cover the story. We still have to do the work to get the story out.
Grant, you're
Look at
right. Let me say something
Phoenix
real
Lights.
quick. Alfred, let me say something real quick. It is an important story, but it's not on everybody's important list. So all we can do is, like Grant said, is to share our information. And you know, David Baum wrote a book years back. It was called On Dialogue, and it's about having dialogue. And he makes the point that few people really have real dialogue because everybody's trying to force whatever they're wanting to get across on other people, and you can't force it. You know, all you can do is share. That's all we can do. We can share.
Well, no, we're not.
information.
No, right. I agree. It's a collective issue. But what I'm saying is that to believe that the mainstream media is not participating in not sharing these stories is ridiculous. Because look at the Phoenix Lights. I mean, that turned into a big joke. That was one of the biggest mass sightings in modern history. Do you see the national news still talking about that? That was
Well,
pushed on
if you look
right after it happened.
recently, Tucker Carlson's been talking a lot about the Tic Tac UFOs and all that.
Let me give you another example. You take Donald Trump. I mean, he'll do something that you say, that's it. I mean, he's gone. He's gone. Within about 4 hours, he's dropped another story, and everybody's completely forgotten. How many stories have gone
Right.
through? Like, they got a time capsule of maybe 5 hours on a story inside the White House, and that's the thing. It's moving so fast. There's so many stories. If you take a look at people, I travel a lot on bus. So you watch people on the bus, and everybody's on Facebook, and everybody's flipping through their Facebook as they're sitting on the bus, and they're going through story after story. And I found the same thing with UFO news, is that you put it, and I do this on Facebook, so I'll watch Facebook, and I'll think, this is the biggest story I've got. I put it on Facebook and I get a lot of hits. So in the first hour, I may get 100 hits, and then it's down, and you can see within maybe 2 or 3 hours, there's nobody reading that story anymore, because everybody's got 500 friends or 1,000 friends on their Facebook, and you're off their Facebook list within minutes. People are moving so fast through news that they just want to, and that's what the problem I have with ufology is, that a lot of people, to them, this is just entertainment. It's like the news isn't very good, so I want disclosure. And I say, well, what do you want for disclosure? What do you want the government to do? And they say, well, we want them to tell. And it's, well, you want them to tell you what you think is going on. What happens? So you say they give us disclosure, and they say, this is really going on, it's for real. I'll guarantee you what's going to happen. It's going to be like, your team won the Super Bowl. You're going to have a couple of beers at night. Everybody's going to give high fives. Fantastic. And tomorrow, you and everybody else are getting up to go to work. I will not change anything. It's just something that we already know, and it has to apply to your own personal life. And I found through my life, my kid, you can ask my kid. I've been in this 44 years, and I've been around the world. I've lectured and stuff. You ask my kid, they'll say, what does your dad do? He just says, put his name in Google. That's all he'll say to them. Just put his name in Google. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's a pilot. My father was a pilot. He wasn't interested. My whole family, they tolerate it, but they don't listen. They have no interest. And so to me, it's this idea that when I find stories like I've heard here on the show today, and then I put them out, I just find a way. How can we do it? What's the way I can do it to get the most coverage in this thing? And that's when I found YouTube is the biggest thing, that if you can catch on to that and put it out, then you just let the universe take it. And when the time is right, it will happen, not before. That's why the aliens are not, or whoever they are not actually, they could land on the White House lawn if it's a big story, and they could say, here we are, this is what it's all about, this is why we're here. They're not. They're doing the breadcrumb thing the same way. They want you to make the step. They want you to discover it. That's why they do this little indirect thing. They're not telling us directly either. They're doing the same thing. They want you to discover it, because when you discover it and make that discovery, then it means something, and it changes your life, and it's one life at a time. That's the same way they're doing it, one person at a time.
It's all about waking up, and everybody's waking up at a different time.
It's a hard word, Grant, to get used to, the word kairos, in the right moment. And that's all on the other side. The other side's in control. We're not. So
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Grant, we have one person with their hand raised. Brad, if he could maybe have.
Okay, Brad. And maybe Brad, if Brad comes on next time, we can start with him. I was thinking that there's a couple of people here that have wanted to talk for a couple of meetings. If we get them to give a message to Desta, we will start with them the next time, because there's a couple of people who haven't been able to get in here. So go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Grant. Thank you and Desta for sending me the invitation for this meeting. This question goes directly to Dr. Silva and his statement from Carl Jung. The planet, we might, or the evolution of people's awareness might take up to 600 years. Sorry, that doesn't work for me in my schedule, unless we start counting back when Galileo was around. So tell me what the start date is for that timeline that you're referring to.
Well, Jung come to that conclusion after studying 80,000 dreams from different people all around the world, all nationalities. So he cast a pretty big net, and that's what the tea leaves told him. So, but they're tea leaves, it's like a weather forecast. Maybe it's 800 years, maybe it's 400 years, who knows? But, we just have to keep our eyes on the idea that whatever we're being challenged with, this is what we should attend to, and leave these bigger concerns to Gia or the other side who's really in charge. And maybe it will save us from a third world war, despite our poor performance in stepping up to the line here and getting on track.
Just a related story to that, Brad. There was, if you follow Terrence McKenna and the whole thing with the ayahuasca, now it's popular, but when he first started talking about it, his brother is a pharmacologist. If you've heard the story where he goes to the the Brazilian jungle, and he takes the ayahuasca, and they take him through the plant, and he's inside this plant, and he's going through, and he suddenly realizes like we're destroying the rainforest, and he's all freaking out, and he says, how can this happen, or whatever, and the ayahuasca says to him, do you really think we're going to allow this to happen? You monkeys just think you're running the show. Calm down. It's
Yeah, that's a good one, Grant. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, the short answer is I do remember reading that, but again, you're aware with the story that I've given you, and so ultimately the stuff that I've learned, the reason why I'm here is exactly that, to come along and help aid Gaia to sort this mess out. The call was put out a long time ago, so that's why I'm a little concerned with the number that you keep on, that you referred to, Dr. Silva. So,
well, we all want fast food. We want the quick fix. We're all hooked on that. But it's hard to wait for the kairos. And as Jung said, all good things lie in the kairos. He knew he had to wait for the kairos. He was powerless. All he could do was summarize and tell people what he saw. And now we each have that chance to do the same and tell ourselves, first of all, what we saw. But yeah, I'm sorry about the fast food. I don't believe in it.
Yeah, don't eat any of those vegetable burgers, though, those meatless burgers as well, because they're apparently highly processed and contain 13 times more glyphosate than a regular meat patty. So beware.
It's all about the money. There's one other thing that is now it's gonna flip my mind here. About the time. As you know, there's 39% of all experiencers are on board the ship who are shown the screen, and they're showing this environmental devastation and stuff like that. And in a reincarnation world, that's all going to be doesn't really, like, people will complain this is a terrible world, this whatever is going on or whatever. And I always say you got to remember you chose to be here at this point in this time in space. And maybe it's because you were in this bad time, you chose to be here at this bad time. And there's even a lot of these people see these horrible visions, which are going to be, to me, just new experiences. And the one is very traumatic. It was a woman who runs a news network out of, or a news radio network out of Las Vegas. And she told me the vision she saw. I said, well, when you saw the vision, was it a flood? Was it because people see floods, they see nuclear stuff, they see this giant flame of fire that comes over the land and stuff. She said, no, I'm pretty sure it was a flood because there was trees in the third floors of buildings and stuff like that. And then she said it was like total devastation, and there was 1 billion people were killed. And the being said to her, this is what it may take for you people to finally get the message. And even if that happens, if 1 billion people get killed, that's still experience. People are then, it may be the fact that you need pain in order to learn the lesson. As I always used to tell my kid, God created pain for a reason. If you don't have pain, you don't know if you have cancer, you don't know you have a broken leg or whatever, that everything is there for a reason. And even if you have this devastation that we say, we want the good stuff, we don't want the bad stuff, just give us all this good stuff, that even the bad stuff is going to be educational and maybe what we need.
Was that a flood she had experienced?
I asked her, she believed it was a flood, yes.
A flood. Well,
but there's different people see different things. There's because I always ask people when they were on board the ship, I say, did they show you the screen? And a lot of people say, yeah, I saw the screen. And
but I wouldn't take that literally.
Well, no, because people see different things.
The flood thing. But that says to me, just off the cuff, is that 1 billion people are going to be experiencing this UFO phenomena, and they're going to be flooded with the contents from the other side. And so that's a hopeful thing.
Well, you can't take it literally because everybody's seeing different things. Like there's about 4 different types of images they show. And then the one guy even said to the being, he hasn't been on this broadcast, but I've invited him, but he actually said to the beings, he said, you're not going to let that happen. Don't give me that. And then he said the being actually looked like him, like, oh, okay. And he this tall being sort of walked away as if he had picked this up. And it's sort of like, it could be symbolic. So it could be, we got a nuclear problem, we've got an environmental problem and stuff, and they're just giving us these messages, and that there really is no big devastation about to happen.
Well, Grant, I'd just like to jump in real quick about the screen. I've been on the ship and seen the viewing screen, and they've showed me, and what at the end of it, I looked at them and I felt like guilty for what I've seen and what they've shown me. And they look at me and say basically that you live in a pliable universe, that whatever you create, you can change. So we know that the future is pliable and it's changeable. So this is just a view, a glimpse of what is a possibility of what you're going to could happen. And yes, people see things through the viewing window differently because of their contact experience and their perception. But mine was flying over Earth and everything was just gone. There was no rivers, there was no sound, there was no animals, there was no nothing. And as I said, when they looked at me after they showed me these pictures, these images, I felt ashamed to be human. I just looked down on the ground and they said, you know, that basically, like I said, that we live in a pliable world, reality, that we have the right and the chance to fix it. And someday, either our generation or the next generation or children's generation is going to change that. And it will be fixed because we are in the future. We are in the past. Everything is in the moment. Quantum physics shows that. Everything exists in the now. So if we exist in the now, then we have to believe that we'll always exist. So we're never going to destroy this place. That's a given. It's just, when do we turn our consciousness around to realize that?
Right. Well said. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll probably have another one next Saturday and then take a break for a couple of weeks because I'm traveling. But we'll do another one next Saturday. So if you don't get the link, maybe send an email, and if you know anybody that has a story that we need to hear, send them the link, and let's talk again.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you, guys.
Universal peace.
Thank you, everybody.
Namaste.
Ciao.
Namaste. Shante. Shante.